The house was silent in that particular way that only happens when you're completely alone. Mark stood in the doorway of the bedroom he shared with his wife Sophia, his fingers lightly tracing the wooden frame. 3 years of marriage, and he still sometimes couldn't believe this was his life. Their comfortable 2-bedroom house in the suburbs, Sophia's successful career that often took her on weekend business trips like today, and the quiet understanding they'd built between them. "Just me for the next 2 days," he murmured to himself, stepping into the bedroom. His eyes drifted to Sophia's side of the closet, the door slightly ajar. Inside, her clothes hung in neat rows, blouses, skirts, and dresses organized by color. One dress in particular caught his attention, a simple navy blue wrap dress with tiny white polka dots. Sophia had worn it to dinner just last week, and he remembered complimenting her on how elegant she looked. Mark swallowed, his heart suddenly beating a little faster. The thought had crossed his mind before, many times, if he was being honest with himself. What would it feel like to try on something of Sophia's? Not in a mocking way, but out of genuine curiosity. How would the fabric feel against his skin? How would it change the way he moved? "This is silly," he whispered, but his feet carried him to the closet anyway. His fingers brushed against the soft material of the navy dress. It was one of Sophia's favorites, made of some kind of stretchy fabric that draped nicely. She'd mentioned once that it was comfortable, easy to wear. Mark carefully removed it from the hanger, holding it up in front of him. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the window caught the fabric, making the white dots seem to shimmer slightly. "Just to see," he told himself, his voice barely audible even in the empty house. He laid the dress carefully on the bed and stood there for a moment, just looking at it. Then, taking a deep breath, he pulled his t-shirt over his head and stepped out of his jeans. Standing in just his underwear, he picked up the dress again. It took him a moment to figure out how the wrap style worked, which part went where, how the belt tied. His hands trembled slightly as he slipped his arms through the sleeves, adjusting the fabric across his shoulders. The dress was designed to accommodate curves he didn't have, but as he wrapped it around his waist and tied the belt, he was surprised to find that it didn't look as out of place on his frame as he might have expected. The material was soft against his skin, nothing like the stiff cotton of his button-up shirts or the rough denim of his jeans. Mark turned slowly toward the full-length mirror on the closet door. "Oh," he breathed. His reflection showed someone he recognized but had never quite seen before. The dress softened the angles of his body. The deep blue complemented his dark hair and brought out the blue in his eyes. He turned slightly, watching how the fabric moved with him. There was something so freeing about it, the way the skirt part swished around his knees, how it made him stand differently, shoulders back, more aware of his posture. "This is nice," he whispered to his reflection, a small smile tugging at his lips. He took a tentative step, then another, walking back and forth across the bedroom, getting used to the feeling of the fabric moving around his legs. Each step felt like a tiny revelation. Was this how Sophia felt when she wore dresses? This sense of lightness, of gentle movement? Mark caught sight of Sophia's makeup bag on the dresser. He hesitated for only a moment before picking it up and taking it into the bathroom. He'd watched Sophia apply her makeup countless times, not with any particular interest, just the casual observation that comes from sharing a space with someone. "Just a little," he told his reflection in the bathroom mirror. His hands were less steady with the makeup than they had been with the dress. He fumbled with the mascara wand, nearly poking himself in the eye. The lipstick, a subtle mauve shade Sophia often wore to work, went on unevenly at first, but he managed to blot it and smooth it out. A touch of blush on his cheeks, applied with fingertips rather than the brush, because he wasn't quite sure how to use it properly. The result was subtle, barely noticeable really, but it changed his face in ways he found fascinating. His eyes looked bigger, his features softer. "Is this what she sees?" he wondered aloud, tilting his head to study his reflection. He walked back to the bedroom, feeling more confident now. The swish of the dress against his legs was no longer strange but pleasant. He caught his reflection again in the full-length mirror and stopped, taking in the whole picture. The person looking back at him wasn't exactly a woman, but wasn't quite the Mark he was used to seeing either. There was something in between, something that felt strangely like a more complete version of himself. A sudden sound, The front door opening made his heart leap into his throat. Mark? You home? My meeting got canceled, so I caught an earlier flight. Sophia's voice carried up the stairs. Mark froze, panic seizing him. There was no time to change, nowhere to hide. Up here? He called back, his voice cracking. He could hear Sophia's footsteps on the stairs, coming closer. He stood rooted to the spot, unable to move as she appeared in the doorway. Her expression shifted from a smile to surprise, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of him in her dress, the subtle makeup on his face. Mark? She said softly. I can't explain, he started, voice trembling. I wanted to see. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. But Sophia was crossing the room toward him, her expression not angry or disgusted as he'd feared, but gentle, curious. Hey, she said, reaching out to touch his arm. Breathe. He took a shaky breath, searching her face for any sign of judgment. I've never. He tried again. This isn't something I've done before. I was just curious, and you weren't supposed to be home, and The dress looks nice on you, she said simply, cutting off his rambling. Actually, it brings out your eyes even more than it does mine. Mark blinked at her, not quite processing her reaction. You're not upset? Sophia shook her head slowly. Surprised, yes. But upset? No. She gently adjusted the collar of the dress where it had folded wrong. I've always believed that clothes are just clothes. They don't define who we are. I don't know what this means, Mark admitted, gesturing vaguely at himself. I just wanted to know how it felt. And how does it feel? Sophia asked, genuine interest in her voice. Mark thought for a moment. Different. Nice. Like I'm seeing a part of myself I didn't know was there. Sophia smiled, reaching up to gently wipe away a small smudge of lipstick from the corner of his mouth. Then I'm glad you tried it. She took his hands in hers, looking at him with such openness that the last of his tension began to melt away. Would you like to try one of my other dresses? She asked. I think the green one might suit you better, actually. And I could help with the makeup if you want. You did pretty well for a first try, but that mascara is a little clumpy. Mark laughed, a sound of pure relief. You'd do that. Of course, Sophia said, squeezing his hands. And maybe you could tell me more about this part of yourself you're discovering. I'd like to understand. I'm not sure I understand it myself, Mark admitted. That's okay too, Sophia said. We can figure it out together. She reached up and placed a gentle kiss on his cheek, careful not to smudge his makeup further. When she pulled back, she was smiling. Now, let's see about that green dress. And maybe we can order in tonight? Make an evening of it. Mark nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude and love, so strong it almost brought tears to his eyes. I'd like that, he said softly. As Sophia turned toward the closet, Mark caught sight of himself in the mirror again. The person looking back at him now were not just a dress but also a smile, one that reached all the way to his eyes, where a new kind of light seemed to shine. For the first time, he felt like he was seeing himself clearly, all of himself, not just the parts he'd always shown to the world. And instead of fear, what he felt now was a quiet joy and the comfort of knowing he wasn't alone in this discovery.